thank you very much for coming. Thank you for understanding all the changes with the new venue. We are here as a community team to support each other, so we're happy that everyone is here. Now, as a show of hands, how many of you have been to a Startup Grind event before? Can I see, just to, okay, get a sense, okay, about half of the room have been. Maybe half the room hasn't, so everybody's welcome to the community. My name is Gabriel. I'm the newest addition to the Startup Grind community team. And this is actually, yes, it's working. Yes, well, after coming to the event for many years, it was about time that I joined the team. So, yes, next slide, please. Just to give you a bit of context about Startup Grind. Startup Grind is the world's largest community for founders, entrepreneurs, creators, and it's all around entrepreneurship. It's been going for many years, and we bring the community together through a series of events in different chapters around the world. Nearly 600, if I'm not wrong. And there's also flagship conferences where we kind of bring them together. Our mission, our values are pretty straightforward. It's more around helping others. We encourage collaboration, and if you're going to ask, you give first. What we mean by that is like you come in, you connect, you educate each other, you learn, and you make connections and get inspired at our events. And that's how we've been growing in so many cities around the world. Next slide. Give you a bit of, okay, this is our team. Peter is not here today, Prem. And then we have James, who is at the back. We have Sam here at the front, and myself, as I mentioned, just recently joined. So now, before we get started, today we have a really interesting topic. It's around AI, unleashing AI. And everybody, okay, can you hear me? Okay, perfect. This microphone is failing a little bit. Now, before we get started, I just want to tell you about the upcoming event. It's on the 18th of April, and it's at the AirWallex offices. And so then we're doing that on VC. It's a VC panel. So if anybody's interested, only for the people here in the room, we're giving out a free ticket with the VIP code. So feel free to go on our site for that. Now, this is where to find us. startupgrind.com/London. And there we go. So now, before we get to hear from our partners, we want to say a big thank you to all of them. We have AirWallex in the room. We have Howard Kennedy and Monpack. And a big thanks to, next slide, our amazing venue, Runway East. They have hosted us tonight, and they support a lot of communities in tech and startups. So yes, we're in Supreme Factory. Also, they support companies coming into the market, and we'll send more information about everybody. Now, before we get started, I'd like to introduce a couple of our partners so that we get to hear a little bit about them, and then we get the panel started. So first of all, I'd like to bring Anastasia. Maybe this microphone is better. Try. You can come on in, and let me give you this. Mm-hmm. Oh, my wallet. There we go. Okay, there we go.
Hello. Can everyone hear me? I can hear myself now. Yeah, thank you so much for the introduction. We're delighted to be here sponsoring the event. We were actually, so a bit of the history of AirWallex, we were actually built upon an idea of our founder, Jack, who actually ran a coffee shop in Melbourne, and there was some teething issues with suppliers and the cross-border payments there. So as a true entrepreneurial spirit, he wanted to just come up with a solution. So the coffee company is no longer, but AirWallex was born. So yeah, the idea of what we do, we're an infrastructure that allows you to expand globally. It removes the boundaries of cross-border transactions and just allows you to operate as a global company at a local level, or maybe the other way around, a local company. Local presence at a global level. I like to, well, it's a kind of trick question because the next Startup Grind event is at our offices. So if no one has heard of Airwallex, has anyone not heard of Airwallex? I expect everyone to put their hands up. But yeah, so these are just a couple of key facts and figures from our company. So from our humble beginnings as a startup, we're now valued at 5.6 billion. We are licensed around the world, and with that in mind, that we partner with the likes of sort of JP Morgan, American Express, and Barclays. We're backed by large investors, but also trusted by the most important part, which is our clients. I don't want to scare you away. There are big names there, but actually, you know, we support the SME, most of our book is the SME sort of clients, and the idea is that we have a product that basically is end-to-end. So, you know, if you're in the early stages of looking to move cross-border or operate in non-domestic markets, we can support you there. And here is just essentially the four pillars of what we do. So essentially it's how we collect money, how we manage money, and how we spend that money. So in terms of collection, we can set up a global account in 3 clicks. So instead of deploying your employees or hiring in, say, the US, you can create a domicile global account in 3 clicks, which, you know, kind of just in terms of the flexibility of expanding is pretty quick. In terms of merchant acquiring, we found that we've actually done some research, independent research, and 77% of merchants or customers prefer to buy in their own local currency, but also with their own preferred payment methods. So I'm sure if you've gone online and you haven't got the likes of Apple Pay, you kind of abandon the cart or think that you're going to go back later. So we basically provide those sort of services. Then in terms of managing, it kind of crosses over with the collection there. So you can open up a domiciled account in those countries that you see there. Also experience reduced fees if you have multiple entities and you want to transfer within those countries as well. And then in the send and spend category, so you can do faster payments to your suppliers, eliminate the delays and fees associated with that, bill pay, so you can batch pay in multi-currencies, which saves on time and also cost. Borderless cards, so you can spend as if you're a local as well in multiple regions, and also expense management. So you've got company cards and that sort of thing too. Just, yeah, basically operating as a local globally. And there is myself and my colleague Robbie. If you would like to speak to us, whichever stage you're at, we'd be more than happy to get to know you, get to know your business and that sort of thing. So yeah, that's me.
Brilliant, thank you very much.
It's okay.
My turn now. Thank you. Cheers. Can you hear me?
We have Matthew from our...
I think, is there another slide? Yeah, we'll start at that one. So hi everyone, I'm Matthew Lamb from law firm Howard Kennedy. I'm part of our law firm's startup team, and we've been involved with Startup Grind for I think since at least 2015. Over that period of time, we have advised hundreds, if not thousands, of founders through the whole life cycle, so from idea stage all the way through to IPO. One of the things that really sets us apart is that we've seen businesses scale rapidly, and we've been there along the journey with them, but we've also seen them fail. And actually we know what startups need when, so we're not trying to sell you advice that you don't need at any particular time. So we really get to know founders, and that's why we set up the Ignite program. So benefits of it, I won't read it off the screen, but the main bits that will be of interest to you all is we offer up to 30% discount on our fees. We fix them as well for a 3-year period, so it's all locked in and you've got that price certainty. The value add that we're offering as well, so we help founders find non-exec directors to help your business scale without giving away equity. We will also, if you are wanting to give away equity, introduce you to some of the investment funds that we're working with. So we work with the top 10 VC managers in the UK. So yeah, it's more than just law, and that's where we really specialise. We have on the next slide, you'll see our startup team. So most of the people are here. If you'd like to raise your hand, Howard Kennedy team, so everyone knows where you are in the room, that'd be great. So yeah, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to give us a call. And we'll be in San Fran as well for the Startup Grind Global Conference, which will be great. So if anyone's going, do give us a shout. Cheers.
Okay, I think this is working now. So, and finally, we also have one more partner who are not in the room today, but they'll be actually speaking next time. And this one is called Monpack. It's an outsourced financing and accounting firm. It's called, as I said, it's called Monpack. And they actually also work and operate with multiple clients in the UK and abroad. And they've supported over 1 billion in venture financing in the past. So a little bit of context around them. So they are a solution for startups and scale-ups. And it's basically these are some of the services they do. They have offered kindly the community a discount, and we'll send you more information about that too. But if you want to get to know and meet the CEO, he will be speaking next week at our next event in the same VC, the VC panel. Okay, so we are done with introductions, and we are finally ready to get started with the panel today. We're here to learn about AI Unleashed. Can we change to the next slide? And yes, I would like to welcome on stage our moderator, Franki Tabor, and our panelists, Victoria and Jonathan. So I'll leave you with the mic here. There's another one. Mm-hmm.
Hello, hello.
You can share this one. Yeah, one is for the recording, but one is for the room.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Before we get started, I'd love to kind of gauge the room and see where everyone is at when it comes to sort of AI. So could you put your hand up if you understand generative AI and large language models? Maybe you've even started experimenting, developing. Great. Okay, cool. About 70% of the room. What about AI agents? Has anyone looked into AI agents? Okay, far fewer, but we're definitely going to be looking at productivity gains today with AI agents. So I'd love to do some introductions. So first off, we've got Jonathan Gilmore, who is the CEO of AI8, which is a commercial lab. They're raising 5 million to develop an operating system for human and machine organization. And he's been consulting government on digital skills and the future of jobs. Welcome.
Cheers. Thanks for having me.
Would you like to introduce yourself a little bit more?
What do you want me to say? So I've been obsessed with how people learn and how knowledge translates into intelligence, which translates over time into skills, how they're formed, how they're applied in different contexts, and how that changes in an age where machines start to have intelligence, both in the forms of large language models, which you can consult on kind of a prompt basis, but also potentially as those large language models become chained to a series of activities and tasks, and eventually start to be able to perform runs of jobs, and where that leaves humans, and where that leaves beyond just the human as a node within a company, but also the consequent network of people and machines, and what we'd call a human-machine organization.
All right, that's a wrap. And now I'll pass it over to Victoria Albrecht, who is the CEO of Springbok, which is essentially a tool to help law firms to move into this new generative AI and AI era. Would you like to introduce yourself a little bit more, and also Springbok?
Yeah, thank you. It's awesome to be here, and I'm still a little bit sweaty, I have to admit. I just ran over pretty much from a legal tech event over in Belgravia, so excuse the odd sweat pearl on my skin, on my forehead. And thanks to James for setting this up and your patience. So I'm Victoria from Springbok AI, and we've been going for 6 years, actually. We didn't quite start in legal. We started very general. We were, I think, the third AI consultancy in London at the time, so back before AI was in on everybody's mind, working with large language models. And a couple of years ago, we had a few breakthroughs with working with Dentons, which was a big case study for us, and Hogan Lovells, and a few other big firms in the city that you'll have heard of. And now we essentially enable law firms to stay relevant, ultimately, at the end of the day, to understand and leverage and become generative AI enabled, and to build products and assets that can create new revenue streams for them.
Fantastic, thank you. So my first question is to gaze into the future. 5 years from now, what is your vision of how education works, how organizations work, how the legal sector is going to work? Would you like to go first, Jonathan?
Yeah, I guess we believe within 2 to 3 years, you're going to get incredibly well leveraged organizations where maybe half of your workers are machine intelligence and half are human intelligence, and that leads to a whole host of problems of how do you organize these, what happens to the traditional top-down management structures where you set incentives such as salaries and bonuses and hope that people do their jobs, what benefits occur when you've got machines in the loop which are accurately tracking what people do and when, and we think that you're going to get a rise of a load of very leveraged Davids taking on incumbent Goliaths, the 1,000-person insurance company being toppled by the 10-person startup that's using models and agents very well. And so we're really focused on how you solve and organize teams for the better when those things hold true.
And just to elaborate a little bit more, what do you mean by machines?
Machines could be anything from a model such as Llama or GPT-4 or Claude through to custom GPTs, through to agents, which at the moment kind of has been this hocus pocus thing that's promised down the line. We think OpenAI are going to come out with a ton of them this year. We're working with a few of the proprietary or leading ones in the UK in fields like data science. And so it's that package of different types of machine intelligence that we call machines.
Okay, so first of all, I think we have no idea what the fuck the future is going to look like. Let's be really honest. Excuse my French. We have no idea. So all we can do is take some best guesses and look at how fast people have been adopting over the past year. I think the previous years before that are probably not the best indicator. Yes, from the human element of it, and that's always going to be the blocker. But in terms of how quickly people are aware and building their skills, really this past year has shown us an exceptional learning curve. So do I think it's going to continue at that rate? I'm not 100% sure, no. I mean, not sure about anything, really. But we are going to continue to see corporations build AI skills, and I think every single worker will become AI enabled. I actually quite strongly disagree with your point there about 50% of the organization being machine and 50% being human. And maybe it's just the way that you phrased it. But ultimately, I'm seeing two things right now. One is that organizations are cutting a lot of staff that they can replace with AI. And the other one is that organizations are keeping their size, but just looking to create more output. And so what we're going to be seeing over the next 5 years, what is in 5 years, I don't know, but what we're going to be seeing over the next 5 years is just organizations creating a lot more leverage by using AI and generative AI specifically. And what I really strongly agree with you on is that we'll be seeing a lot of very small organizations toppling over much bigger organizations, or at least, again, having much more leverage because they're faster, they're more agile, they're AI enabled. But the cynic in me says, ultimately, every founder gets a bit exhausted and just wants an exit and is looking to sell to one of those big companies. So, well, hey, consolidation.
And perhaps the only constant that I say is this is the worst it's ever going to be, and it's being developed potentially at the slowest rate it's ever going to be developed. And so if you take those forward, where do we end up? How quickly does this get? Do humans ever catch up with the skills required to work alongside them, and those kind of messy problems? Yeah.
Great. So as organizations evolve to this new state of having employees, machines, AI agents, what problems do you foresee as they progress to this new status quo, and how do your projects help solve some of those problems that they face?
Well, I think we can start with the biggest problem that there is already right now, which is always just like the data and the governance around the data. Ultimately, it's, you know, what data do you have, how is it stored, who accesses what, and then the psychology of getting people to use the stuff that you want them to use. Like, it's kind of as simple as that if we really break it down at the end of the day. But like a huge issue that organizations that have been around, you know, sort of more than 10 years from today, is that their data is an absolute mess. Like, stuff isn't structured, it's not labeled. You know, there's this sort of illusion that we can just like pour everything into an LLM and then it will like train itself magically and it could be really, really good. And it's just complete crap. It's completely unrealistic. But what we can do is we can build small specific systems, like people call them point solutions, or, you know, mini bots or assistants or whatever we want to call them. But we can build, or agents, you know, build these specific solutions for specific problems, and that's where we're going to get more reliable output. And ultimately, the bigger the organization, the more risk averse they ultimately are, and you know, that's what we need to be mindful of. But yeah, data, infrastructure, and people psychology, is, I would say, are going to still remain the biggest challenges. What do you think?
So again, from the skills perspective, I think skills atrophy will become a huge thing. If you start generating a document and passing that on to your boss, and they're generating feedback and critic of it, at what point are people actually going through the cognitive process to keep skills sharp? And at what point are students in university or apprenticeships or other forms of education, are they actually learning? It's not necessarily what you do, but it's who you become through doing a thing. And if you're not actually doing the thing, do you end up with the skills required? So maybe linking in with your point about organizations and risk, we think startups will end up generating everything they can. All they can do is take risk. All they can do is try to move forward as quickly as possible, get feedback, take the hits and move forward. A larger organization, we think, may end up setting a resilience level, which is the degree to which you automate things that can be automated, and perhaps you end up passing on projects or jobs or simulations to people that aren't required to functionally push the needle forward, but will end up keeping that person's skills sharp, such that if machines or models cost more, if they drop out in performance, your staff still have the fundamental skills required to execute their day-to-day capabilities. Maybe a foreshadowing of this was last August in Europe, where air traffic control systems went down. The countries with more automation were worse off. No one knew how to do their jobs, no one knew what to do to move things forward, and countries that had less automation were perhaps sat with the sunglasses on, a little bit more chill. And so if that's any prediction of where things are going, when potentially every job, every team, every function has some level of automation, we think they'll be working in simulations as part of your job to keep skills sharp.
Fantastic. So if we could just delve a little bit deeper into the data strategy piece. So how does data fit in with AI strategy, and where do you access data? Do all organizations need to start fine-tuning their own models? What issues are there with the EU AI Act? So on and so forth. The list of questions goes
So on and so forth. Where do we begin? Okay, I'll tackle the should every organization build their own LLM question first, because I feel quite strongly about that. And my answer is no. And it's actually no for the reasons that I already mentioned before, that, you know, the quality of the data isn't really that good. But if we take a step back, and I'm just going to put this down because I like talking with my hands. There we go. So if we take a step back, how does anyone know how fine-tuning works? Like what happens on a technical level? Okay, a couple of people in the room. Great. So please call me out if I go on off-piste. But essentially, what you're doing when you're fine-tuning is the models themselves already have a really vast amount of data. I mean, we all know that GPT-4 is trained on I don't know how many trillion data points or data sets. And what we're doing when we're fine-tuning is we're taking out some of that data, replacing it with our own data, and then retraining it. The challenge is that I'm very much oversimplifying here, but the challenge is that it's a black box when we retrain. Yeah, it's a black box now when OpenAI trained their model, and even Sam Altman said in front of Congress, like, I can't tell you what the variables are and what the parameters are. We have 95 billion parameters. Like, how am I supposed to tell you what they are? And like to make it traceable, it's virtually impossible. So to think that you can take out a chunk of the data, retrain it with your own data, that data is good enough, and most importantly, that it is of high enough volume to actually make any sort of dent in that model, that original model, is pretty ludicrous. And then you'll train it, and if you don't like the outcome, you can't exactly say, ooh, I want it a little bit more like this, let me retrain in this way. No, you can hit retrain, or you can tweak a few parameters, you can retrain it. It'll probably take you about 3 months to do that process, and then you have, again, it's kind of a black box, and then you don't know what you're getting out of it at the end of the day. And I'll give you one really specific example that hit home on this for me. So Bloomberg made this huge media announcement in, I think it was June or July last year, about Bloomberg GPT. And they're like, we have the best financial data in the world. We're going to create the super master duper, obviously they didn't use different language, but to this effect, finance LLM. And so they spent, I don't know how many millions training it, and they got this LLM out of it, and they're like, look, it performs better than GPT 3.5, and it's better at these financial tasks, and it isn't amazing, we've done such a great job. Pat ourselves in the back. Great, okay, come October, paper gets released. Ooh, GPT-4 performs better than Bloomberg 3.5. Well, isn't that a bummer? They've spent millions, and within just a few months, there's a new model that's a general model that's 40 times better than the previous version, and it outperforms the model that you've just paid a bunch of money for. So the chances are, even if you're training something with a unique, if you're fine-tuning with a data set of your own, and even if data is amazing, the chances are that the next iteration of the best large language model on the market is going to outperform that. So I say it's a complete waste of time, honestly.
You've seen the rise of things like RAG, so retrieval augmented generation. And there was a post by a guy called Ethan Mollick, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, which said humans believing that we can give it local context, which will forever kind of give it some level of superpower, which we've thought maybe for the past 6 months, or people have, it's been a very popular topic. It will be a blip in time where we'll laugh at ourselves. And so you can picture it as this rising tide of AI. Sure, you can fine tune and you can put a lot of money and effort and time in making whatever's available in the market now slightly better. By the time you do that, there will be a model, whether open source or whether released by Anthropic or OpenAI, etc., that will not just outperform it slightly. To your point, it'll be 40x better. So yeah, entirely in agreement.
And can you explain what the difference between fine-tuning and RAG is? And
I mean, I will pass this back to you because I expect you more towards the technical end of the spectrum. Yeah.
Okay, so it's essentially two different technical philosophies for how to achieve something, but the output of fine-tuning, I just described the process of fine-tuning, right? So you take the kind of a layer of data in one, you replace it with your own, you retrain the model. So that's what people call fine-tuning in the market, with very, very mixed and unreliable results. A RAG model is, exactly as Jonathan just said, it stands for retrieve, augment, and generate. And those are essentially just, if we're really simplifying it, those are the 3 key skills of generative AI. It's really good at, you can ask it questions like, what is this, you upload a 100-page document and you say, okay, where is, I don't know, for example, in legal context, where is the change control clause mentioned? Or in a startup context, it might be like, a contract with a client that you're doing, and you're asking it, I don't know, who has the liability, like where is liability mentioned? and it'll tell you, it'll retrieve all the different places where that's mentioned, depending on what kind of model you're using, and if you have another layer of data architecture on top of it, you might get better or worse results, and that's kind of a topic for another day. But you use it to either retrieve information and or augment it. So you can, it's a good example of augmentation. You can ask it to, blanking right now. Can someone give me a good example of augmentation?
Use a calculator.
Yes, exactly. Use a calculator. Thank you. Just had a brain freeze. You can ask it to use a calculator, and if you want to generate something that's turn these bullet points into an email, for example. And what is meant when people say we're using RAG to create an output is actually that they're stringing the combination of retrieval, augmentation, and generation together to get to a place where you may just need to upload your share purchase agreement, and then you can download your M&A report, for example. So first, what I foresee happening is, I don't know if you guys have used Vested or what's the other one called for documents for founders?
Seed legals.
Seed legals, exactly. So those are great examples of platforms where they're already enabling, they're putting the power back into the user's hands, and they'll be integrating more and more generative AI in there, where you can basically just say what the variables are that you want to change, and it'll create it automatically for you. And some of it is retrieving information from documents that you've uploaded yourself, and some of it will be creating something from scratch based on input that you give it. But you can create some really, really complex and quite sophisticated solutions as a result of that. And the cool thing, and I think further to your point there earlier, Jonathan, you need some just only really small teams to do really big things these days. That's the really cool thing. You guys are, as I understand it, probably building or working in startups. And man, I wish I had ChatGPT as my co-founder, 10 years ago when I started in this space. And if you're missing a team member or you need some advice, you need a mentor, it's 3 a.m. in the morning, and you can't necessarily afford to pay someone, or you don't have a friend in the West Coast that you can call who happens to be up, that's who you go to. That's who you get direction from. So I think there's a ton of opportunities there, and yeah, startups are building basically a lot of RAG-based products and tools with very few resources, which is an exciting space as well.
Great. So when we look at the future of work and we see various tasks being taken over by AI agents, and then a move in our roles, whether they become an AI marketeer or AI salesperson, which tasks will go to machines and AI agents, and which should not go to machines and AI agents? And then what are the core skills that are sort of defensible in this new kind of AI economy?
So I guess AI, we banned them by the interface that they are. So human, machine, 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 and yeah, human, human. So the human-to-human interface, it's relationships, it's creativity, it's incepting new movements, etc. I think all of that stays, and in fact becomes the most important thing because it's the thing the machine can't take away. Whereas if you were to look at an organization, perhaps most of the internal operations, many of them get automated, and actually, okay, we could put an AI-generated salesperson, and I think initially that will happen. I think a lot of people will employ them, particularly if you're a smaller organization, but I think ultimately it actually becomes way more powerful if instead of offshoring all of our call centers and people getting fed up because they can't have the human-to-human care that they want, because we're saving so much money internally, actually we do want, when you call up your bank and you're in Islington, they're in Angel at the moment, and you say, oh, fantastic, did you notice the market on the Saturday, etc., because I think that gives an increase in customer experience and in care. I think with all of this talk about AI, the AI is the how, it's not the what. So I think businesses, all you should focus on, it shouldn't be we are AI t-shirt company, whatever. No, we make the best t-shirts that represent people's passions and hopes and dreams, and we build communities around them. Oh, and we just so happen to use AI to generate the ideas or to do the supply chain stuff. So yeah, that's how I break it down. I'm not sure whether I've missed anything in the initial question.
No, that's great.
Yeah, I have a small point to add from a slightly different angle, just around skills. So if we step away from the AI-related skills for a second, I really believe the two core skills that we'll need in the future, so AI upskilling, great, yes, totally agree, but aside from that, the two core skills that we'll need in the future are actually, number one, critical thinking, not relying on the AI to just have done it for us, and we sort of become these, dumb zombies that just go around, and I send you an AI-generated email, and you send me an AI-generated email back, and I don't know, maybe have an AI to give me a summary of your AI-generated email. Like, where does this end, Let's be really honest. Like, we just need to do a bit of critical thinking. Like, does this meeting need to be a meeting? Can we send a quick Slack message? Like that sort of, is this, are these seven strategy points all just regurgitations of the same thing in different words that written by AI, or do these actually make strategic sense for us as a company? And so, critical thinking is a skill not just to be taught in organizations or to continue to be fostered organizations and applauded, but also I think this is the critical skill at universities. It's not so much about learning specific information. Like, there's no information advantage anymore of people having information in their brain, not to the same degree that it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and certainly not 20 years ago. But the critical thinking bit is crucial. So that's number one. And number two is communication. Humans will always continue to want to interact and to buy from humans. Like, we still live, hopefully, God forbid, but we still live in the real world and not in the metaverse. I know Mike's looking grumpy about that thought. You're like, I want to be in the metaverse right now. Where's my beer? So yeah, it's all about communication and critical thinking. So ultimately, those human skills and maybe some empathy as well.
And maybe as a subset of critical thinking, so I absolutely agree with both of those. It's the ability as a node in a big old graph network, when stuff's being passed to you, to work through it, to understand what it means for you, to make decisions based off it, and then to be able to communicate them. The two pieces in the graph network are the nodes and the paths between them, and so the humans still need to be good at that, but maybe a subset of critical thinking is having taste, having an opinion, and curation. So if I can generate 100 different marketing ideas, that's no good if I'm then getting the AI to suggest the best one, because actually as my job as the head of marketing or as the social media marketer or whatever is to have an opinion and say, actually, no, this is the best one for our brand, this is what it stands to our users, and this is what we want to take forward. And so I think that curation piece, when we start seeing generated everything as a subset of critical thinking, would be absolutely key.
Yeah, and I feel like we're at a real risk of just, moving towards this land of sort of blandness and meh, right? If we have everything generated by generative AI, it's only ever based on past information. And then, so imagine it this way. Some people are saying the AI will only get better from here. And I conceptually agree, sort of based on Moore's law and all the rest of it, and we've already surpassed that. But anyway, I conceptually agree that yes, like compute power will increase, and for that reason, like hopefully it will get better. But up until a year ago, more or less, most of the information that was out there was generated by humans. So that was, A, original, or B, synthesized thought based on previous original thought. But it was human generated. And if we're now starting to train AI on bullshit regurgitated generative AI blah, where's the quality of data and content going to go? This is a really, really severe risk, and another reason why critical thinking is important. And I feel like where hopefully we're going to move to is also, newspapers that differentiate themselves by, purely human writing. Like maybe, yes, we use AI for editing, but we actually, this is all written by a human, or but that we create more of like a ability to filter like where people have used it and where people have not in their, LinkedIn posts and social media posts, etc. That we need to label where we've used it. But yeah, I don't have necessarily an answer, all the answers, we're all figuring it out, but just on a human level, it's really important for us to be mindful that we could be ending up in a big blah of nonsensical content at some point.
And I think, yeah, it's exactly that. Is the big blur that we want to avoid is Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. Everyone kind of speaks about 1984, this totalitarian state, etc. Actually, Brave New World's about there's going to be so much truth. None of us are going to know which truth is the best truth. We're going to be so apathetic that we won't even bother to decide, and we'll just take what's given to us and move forward. So if you want to read a vision of the future not to go to, it's definitely that one.
Great. So now looking at AI ethics and responsible AI, when we look at performance of these AI models and the fact that they hallucinate, we're going to start adding more and more of this junk data, so the output's not going to be the best. It's going to be the proliferation of even more fake news, which probably came from generative AI in the first place. How are people going to distinguish between a hallucination, their own cognitive biases, and the truth? And who is the arbiter of truth? Is it a lawyer? Is it a data company? Is it a blockchain company? You know, who is deciding?
I think the answer is we're already in that kind of world where there isn't necessarily a single source of truth. And so back to the critical thinking piece, I think of like consecutive industrial revolutions as a stack of replacing some part of us. So physicality, bring in factories, okay, humans step up, Victorians create schools, and we can order things, we can read and write and count bobbins, and then computers come along and we don't need to store the data, etc. And now intelligence is being replaced. Where do we step up to? And so it's being able to critique all of that. And people aren't necessarily given these skills in universities, or some people are, but it's dependent on the individual. It's not necessarily society as a whole is going to be instilled with this ability to determine what is and isn't true. So it's a real risk. You could say we've already maybe passed that with various elections, etc. And Cambridge Analytica in 2016. And were there enough consequences based off the back of that to actually disincentivize that in the future? So it's a real risk, and I think companies who are looking towards that and trying to have an opinion on that and trying to empower the individual to curate their own knowledge, that they can have the critical thinking to determine between it, it's hugely important, and to be resolved.
Yeah, hallucinations. That is a difficult one because ultimately, so the question is, what is the source that we are taking as a reference point from hallucinations? And I guess the sector that I work in the legal sector, we often have the privilege, so to speak, to refer to specific documents, and then we actually have that as the truth that we're working from in terms of, is it hallucinating based, like, does it say that in the contract or not? And so if it's making something up, it's very clear, like, no, it doesn't say that in the contract. But if you are looking for the truth about what happened at at a terror attack or something, to take it to that extreme, well, okay, what is it going to base its information on? It's going to base its information on various different news articles. And as we know from today, depending on what paper you open up, you have very, very, very different reports about what actually happened and which side opened fire or this or that, or how things came to be. So to sort of have a sweeping generalization about how we're going to tackle hallucinations is kind of unrealistic and a bit dangerous. But what I can tell you about how we have tackled it and have done so successfully in our work with law firms, or in our product that we sell to law firms and legal teams, is that we've basically created this data pipeline on top that can sit on top of any large language model. And in the same way that a lawyer is trained to read every single page line by line, and you would never get a lawyer to agree to, like, hey, here's the quick summary of that. They'll be like, no. I need to read this document because I need to have seen every single line in this document. They sort of trust only their own processing. And in that same way, thank you so much, James. Thank you very much. In that same way, we've built a data pipeline. We've built our platform with a data pipeline, so it really reads every single document line by line. And then when we ask it for some information based on that, so if we use, for example, retrieve to ask, show me the clauses that refer to X, we can be very confident that it retrieves it based on having read every single line in that document. And then the next step we can do is to actually show the source of the pages in the original document. Say it's a 100-page document, and it's extracting three bits of that document for us. We can actually show where it's gotten that from. So that's the referencing bit. And when we trust the original source that we're basing it on, like in this case, a contract, or maybe it's an article, or it's an essay, or it's a book that you trust, or whatever it is, then that works and then it's reliable. But if we're just basing it on what's on the internet, the reference part will be extremely important to make sure that we do know, okay, is this from the BBC or is this from Fox News? Like, maybe I trust one more than the other. Anyway, these days, don't know.
And maybe on that, we've already seen with the royal family, right, and Kate releasing this photoshopped image, which had 3-4 separate photos of the children, etc. We're living in an age where, okay, user-generated content or AI user-generated content we can't trust, but now you've also got news sources who are depending on people submitting images or taking a tweet or taking an image or an organization putting forward an image which is in fact false.
Great. So another aspect of AI ethics and responsible AI is bias. So how do we get rid of bias, and should we get rid of bias if marketeers are using bias for personas? If we look at medicine, you've got precision medicine, when in fact you want medicine to be bespoke to your DNA and your conditions, and you want to make sure that the medicine has been tested on your genetic makeup, if you want to go down that route, if you believe in that. So in which scenarios do we need to take out bias? In which case do we need to put more bias in to represent everyone? Do you have any feelings on that question?
I feel like this is a topic that veers into the sort of unrealistic expectations of AI area, because again, what we've been training models on until now is human-generated data, human-generated text with varying levels of quality. But we're humans, we have bias. Every single one of us has bias. There is no unbiased human. And funnily enough, you work with a lawyer and you think this person's really unbiased, or you work with a doctor and you think this person's really unbiased. They're, trained in like this rigorous system, and they're trained to be neutral, and they're supposed to like not pick a side. But hey, they have a socioeconomic background, they have a certain upbringing, they went to a specific college, they have specific values. All of these things form people. Funnily enough, when you go to the top hospitals or when you go to the top law firms, those people kind of fall into a bit of groupthink because they've all been to similar universities. So, have we just accepted as a society that that's the best type of bias? Is that elite bias and we love it? Like, is that what we've decided? I don't know. Sometimes it feels that way, but is that a good thing? Right? But yeah, ultimately, there is bias everywhere. I think what you were talking about in terms of the personalized medicine piece is, what's that balance between making something neutral and therefore not discriminating against someone, versus making something specific and therefore tailored and actually valuable to someone. And I would say those are kind of actually two different conversations or two different challenges to solve. And bias isn't what I would label the personalized medicine one personally. I don't know what your perspective is on that, Jonathan.
Yeah, we think about it as composite intelligence, and so having a collective where the backgrounds, experiences, training data, if that's a machine, is balanced out by the holistic attributes of the team as a whole. So although you can't guarantee that an employee that you have isn't going to be biased in a certain way, nor can you be guaranteed a model is, if you're again using critical thinking and you're taking the system as a whole rather than any individual node, I think actually that gives you the greatest amount of intelligence. There's the wisdom of crowds, right? If you ask 50 people to tell you the weight of the cow, you will almost always get the correct weight of the cow. It's a weird phenomenon, but I think you see that sort of thing. With taking humans and machines as a whole. I think the wrong way to do it, and Google got a lot of flack for this, is where they over-engineered Gemini and you had it generating images that people were getting very upset about because you'd ask for a 12th century, English king, and it wouldn't generate anything that was necessarily historically accurate. In efforts to actually be inclusive and coming from a good place, it got such backlash that maybe it did its aims a harm.
Great. So if it's not possible to be 100% performance, not possible to have an AI model that's 100% without bias, what are your thoughts on the EU AI Act and regulation coming in? Is this just going to put more stumbling blocks in front of innovation, or do you think that this is a welcome conversation that we all need to get educated about the sort of ethical sides of AI?
Yeah, again, I think it's coming from a good place, but I think in AI, speed is everything. How quick you can iterate, get to market, get ahead, train a model, train a bigger, better model, get talent, etc., is everything. And I think this is potentially the most and largest industrial revolution to date, and it is an industrial revolution. And if you go into it trying to handicap what countries can and can't do, you're going to fall behind. You've seen fantastic EU startups like Mistral getting ahead of the competition, taking a slightly different angle to things and doing very well. And if you're then trying to inhibit them, that's a massive danger. Now, are there risks? Yes, absolutely. But that's something that's perhaps to be thought about in tandem with growth, rather than trying to cap the space of what you're trying to search and to find and to contain it, because otherwise you just end up with power in the hands of a few, and namely Microsoft and Apple, right? And then to your point earlier, even a startup that's wanting to do things in a different way and take more risks and challenge an incumbent eventually will get, in some level, swallowed up, and you're going to leave the keys to the next 20, 50, 100 years of the world to very few players. So I'd be more towards the less regulation for now is better. However, AI alignment's important. You're going to get models which are smarter than us. You're going to get super intelligence at some point, whether that's 50 years, 100 years, it's going to happen. And how we work with those systems that we can't outthink or outperform, the alignment's incredibly important. And that conversation needs to be happening now, but it needs to be happening in a way that encourages growth and encourages people to think about these problems rather than trying to kneecap them.
Yeah, what I would add to that is the way that the AI Act is set up is essentially to group projects or AI solutions that people are working on into different categories, right? And depending on whether they deal with sensitive information, like for example in healthcare, and whether they're actually putting people's data and as in people's personal data into them, and whether there are decision outcomes that could affect people's lives, like livelihoods, health, etc. They're essentially tiered and flagged at different risk levels. And if you're in the highest risk level, then you get the most amount of audit. And if you're in the lowest risk levels, then you get, I think, even no audit. And so it's quite sensible in its approach, and it is trying to, do the best in terms of applying to as many companies as possible. I think the real challenge is that, your first question on this panel was, or I think my first or second question was, what's going to happen in 5 years? Well, we don't know. So they've done the best they can with the EU AI Act based on the information now. Will we just continue to have to stay flexible and overhaul it? Yeah, probably. Sam Altman came across as a really noble guy, last year, and I think this was part, very good strategic positioning on his part. And I know his lawyers at DLA well, so kind of two sides of the same story there. But he put himself into this arena to say, we really have to regulate AI. It's really important, and it can do a lot of harm. And he's absolutely right. But if he's the guy saying, if you just think about this critically, back to our point earlier, if he's the guy saying we need to regulate AI, and I can help you how to do it because I understand how it works. And then there's a bunch of other guys from the big tech companies going, yeah, we need to regulate AI. It's really important. It's dangerous. And we can help you figure out how to regulate AI so that it doesn't harm anybody, right? And then you have the big players who are regulating it to the point where they're basically putting a moat around new entrants coming into the market because they're making it so hard for new entrants to come in, and they're making, you know, all the audits and the hoops and the infrastructure they have to have in place and all the rest of it. Like, it was a really smart under the, you know, radar move that he pulled. And, you know, again, where are we going to see the biggest leverage? Well, it's going to be the big companies who have access to all the resources to continue fulfilling all those great regulations that they've now put in place. So, you know, everything with a little bit of a pinch of salt.
Great. And then last question on the sort of AI ethics piece with regards to intellectual property. So we've seen all sorts of lawsuits, whether it's, you know, Stability AI taking images from stock image sites, or you know, even media outlets are challenged now with their articles feeding ChatGPT and OpenAI and all of these models. What's the future of intellectual property when we're essentially feeding these general purpose models with our sort of collective intelligence? Are we going to have intellectual property in the future, or is it just going to be this big mishmash of collective intelligence that we all have equal access to? So democratization of knowledge.
That's a really, really good question, and probably one for a philosophy class. No, genuinely, this will be something that we continue to ask ourselves, and I'm happy to have a stab at it. I'd love to hear your perspective as well. So, you know, there's been several lawsuits, but I think originally a lot of people thought, okay, well, we have to give the rights to the creators, and, you know, this is the way that's going to go. Like, AI can't just suddenly create stuff and then people own the IP of the stuff that they've created. But, you know, some lawsuits have gone in one direction and some lawsuits have gone in another direction. It's not 100% clear where this will end up. The impact of that, if we just are pragmatic about it, the impact of it has not been that people stop using AI to create stuff, but companies have slowed down their enthusiasm with creating stuff and relying on AI, because they're thinking, well, what if this comes to haunt us? Do we really want to be, you know, entirely dependent on this? I could foresee there to be some middle ground where if you've, and this is sort of partially, I'm going to butcher this a little bit, but, you know, partially the definition of something being original in the context of copyright is if it's altered beyond recognition from the original, then you can claim it as your own.
I think it's human authorship. So anything that's human, you can own. But if it's AI generated, prompt engineered, I don't know if that's copyrightable at this stage.
Yeah. So I wasn't even talking about generative AI for a second, but just at the moment when you talk about, like, is something original, is something plagiarized, can I reserve the right to it myself? It needs to be uniquely distinguishable from the original in order to claim something as your own. And then if we transfer that to what does that mean for generative AI? Well, it's a really murky line, right? Because some pieces you see and you're like, wow, that's really close to a Dali artwork. And some of it you see and you're like, I've never seen something like this before, because there's just so much cool mishmash between different things. And yeah, I hope, and there's been the feedback that I've seen from various artists, I hope that it helps people unleash more creativity than it stifles. Personally, I think the notion of copyright and IP is overplayed anyway. It's this, like, strange human urge for ownership, and, like, you know, I mean, who of you owns a bike in the room? Just a question. I'm not going to bite. Who of you has had their bike stolen? Yeah. So my belief is that, you know, you don't own a bike. It's just part of the universe, and then it eventually will belong to somebody else, and then, you know, you get another bike, and it just goes around in circles.
Yeah, but we didn't make the bike.
Who owns your company's code base?
Well, yeah, it's at the moment, you know, it's a combination of the code that we've written and libraries that we've used. But the thing with, you know, also when our clients ask us about, you know, can we have the IP? Like, my answer is, you know, not by default, because when we build it, then we take the responsibility for it. But it's a different price if you want the IP, so we can talk about it. But do you then want the responsibility of having to manage that code and maintain that code? Usually the answer is, no, I just like the idea of owning it. So we need to, going back to what does IP mean? What are people going to do with that? Maybe this is changing our sense of ownership, and how much do people even own these days anymore? Anyway, go back to the idea of bicycles. It used to be so normal 10 years ago to own a bicycle. That was like probably the first bit of your own real estate that you had, maybe aside from a computer. And now people are renting bicycles by the month. Nobody cares about owning a bicycle anymore, right? So yeah, the times are, I think, changing. What do you think?
I mean, it's that foreboding sentence, you will own nothing and be happy, right? And we see that with everything. We don't own movies, we don't own music, we don't, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. We have more choice, we have more flexibility, more autonomy. The cost of that is we don't have a 1,000 DVD collection, right? Or books on Kindle, whatever. To go into IP, there's people looking at backwards mapping anything generated using AI, whether that's visual or text-based, and being able to attribute the authors of that eventual piece. And then, so when you monetize it, you can say actually 0.1% of this belongs to so-and-so. Where I think that falls apart is any company with commercial sense will just choose to eliminate artworks or inspirations or song bits, etc., from any individual that they'll have to pay, and they'll go towards public source domain, anything in the public domain that they can still generate effective things, but they won't have to end up paying. So yeah, maybe on the philosophical question, I think, yeah, ownership changes. I don't know where that necessarily goes.
There's also the prompt engineering side. So if you're writing, I want to create an image of Dior, you're using the name of Dior. So clearly you're referencing that brand. So there's that piece. But just to close up.
So add a quick piece to what Jonathan just said. Yeah, so one other avenue that I could see as a potential in terms of using, using a combination of songs to create a new song, using a combination of images to create new images, is there will probably become some new marketplaces and business models where if somebody is using your stuff as inspiration for creating something new, then can you be paid royalties for that, even if it's like fractions of pennies, like whatever. But how can we give back to the original artist for that? Like there are revenue models and products and tools and solutions that we haven't even thought of, but that would be one avenue to make it fair that the person or the group that created it also gets some credit.
I would say it's fair, but it's not fair. If you look at stock image marketplaces, for example, originally they sued the models for taking all the images and training the models, and they could find the watermark. And then they started partnering with these models and building those AI tools and having these blanket licenses for everyone who's on there. And then if you look at the proliferation of images through generative AI, it's just astronomical. So the value of an image is naturally going to go down. So yes, it would be fair, you'd get a micro penny, but at the same time, it's the unit economics just don't stand up in the end.
Yeah, I think that's where I've arrived at with that. The other way to view it is to just absolutely lean into it. And the one person who's done that weirdly is Grimes, the musician who was the ex-partner of Elon Musk. And she says, anyone can use any of my songs to create any music, any visuals, any artistry, but I get 50% of the royalties. And people are generating Grimes songs that don't exist to a Kanye West beat, to a whatever, and she sat there collecting money. I think that's the sort of thing to do in an age of change, is trying to resist it, think how can I wield this and actually productize yourself to maximize and use the leverage, which we keep coming back to for AI, to leverage yourself and let other people create your songs for you.
Great. So last question from me before I hand it over to the audience. So what is your advice for startups in this new era, and when do you predict there will be the first unicorn with 0 employees and just AI agents?
So I think with all the dystopian chat of an accountant can be replaced, a paralegal can be replaced, a junior developer, anything that's very specialized is essentially got a very specific training set, and that's kind of scary. Actually, the best people in the world to be using this is you guys. It's you're being given unparalleled leverage that you've never had before, that you can act like a 50-person operation, maybe with only 5 or 10 people. So it's a thing to be excited about, but it doesn't necessarily happen by default. So the core skill, I'd say, is curiosity. You need to be trying things, testing things at a rate of knots, and looking over your shoulder and saying, I've found 50 ways AI doesn't work for my business, and one that works really well, and I know that none of my competitors have. And so again, to the Grimes example, leaning into finding new and weird ways of using this, because you're going to strike upon something that someone else hasn't. One of my favorite books is by David Epstein, and it's called Range. It's instead of being kind of top 1% mathematician in the world, be top 10% at design, top 10% at football, and top 10% at, I don't know, social media or video content. And the consequent synthesis of those areas, you're going to be in the top 1,000, right? And so if you find what that unique edge that you have is, and you find a way to use AI in that edge, I can guarantee you, you're going to be way ahead of most people in the world at doing that, and can become a leader in that space. As for the one-person billion-dollar startup, I guess as a soft sales pitch, we're building the operating system to enable that, to enable startups such as yourselves to act with leverage, not to be committed to GPT-4 or Claude or to whatever, but to integrate all of them alongside your existing human capital. And we think maybe by, say, 2027, potentially you'll have more autonomous agents than you will have people on the planet. So by that stage, potentially that will happen. I mean, maybe it's already been done with a content creator. You look at the most subscribed people in the world, that is leverage, right? Someone like Mr. Beast with however hundreds of millions of subscribers I can see someone like him who's creating a very well leveraged empire. Content as leverage, code, community, and capital is kind of Naval Ravikant's view of that. And so using AI in different ways to ensure that.
Wow, how to follow that. I would really agree with everything you said there, Jonathan. Yeah, I'd probably just emphasize the point that I made at the beginning again, and you've made it as well. You know, treat generative AI as that co-founder or the missing pieces that you currently can't afford, don't have access to, whatever. Even if you're skeptical, just try it out. And you know, the $20 a month more for GPT-4 rather than 3.5, like it's the best money you'll spend all month. There are other tools out there that you can try as well. I mean, some of them are like $2 a month, some of them are $20 a month, but you know, it's worth experimenting, and that's really the key, experimentation. You know, exactly as you said, you know, you try out 100 things and you find 5 that really, really work. It'll make a big difference for your business. And yeah, and then there's the thing that is, well, starting to become, I guess, generatable via AI, but still a unique factor, which is that human element of you. Who's running the business? Who's telling the story of your entrepreneurial journey? Who's taking your clients, your investors, your team with you on that journey? You know, make sure that you're leveraging the social media platforms to do that, and to be, you know, in front of front of mind for people that are considering a solution like yours, and having a following on wherever your audience is. You know, work out where that is. Like for us, we sell B2B, so for us that's very naturally LinkedIn. If you're selling B2C, it's probably not so much LinkedIn. You know, then you have other platforms, Instagram, TikTok, and you know, probably some more niche ones. But yeah, that's something that honestly I massively underestimated. I only really started with LinkedIn about 1.5 years ago-ish. Before that, I was pretty much off it, and I'm not a big social media person in general. But it's made such a big difference to our business, how customers find us, and just having credibility up front and them knowing your story already before they've met you. Don't fill that with generative AI generated garbage, please. Please don't. People see right through it. People are on platforms because they want to be inspired, they want to be entertained, they want to be educated. And you need to come up with something that's original, that's unique to you and your insight. And why the hell would we buy your product? That's the question that ultimately you need to kind of be able to answer or get them excited for. So yeah, those would be my 2 minutes.
Great. How many questions do we have time for?
Couple of questions.
3 questions, okay.
I'll pass on the microphone.
Okay.
So we got one here.
Love the talk. Thank you very much. The room, I think, is... Oh, this microphone really does cut out in a kind of Norman... What's his name? The old comic from back in the 80s. I'll speak loudly. Okay, this is working anyway. So I have a question for every bit. I can't obviously do that, so I'll stick with one. Okay, yeah. So, the room is full of AI balls. I'm a bit more of an AI bear. I'm an AI researcher, so I actually think AI is amazing. I just think it's less amazing than the hype. My biggest concern: do you think that there's a real risk that we're embarking on a bubble that's a bit like the cheap credit bubble, where everyone leverages themselves to the hilt so they can grow? I feel like unless the hype about AI really is all that, particularly in terms of replacing employees rather than just augmenting them, I wonder how many companies are going to over-leverage themselves on AI and then implode when the hype bubble bursts. Can you please comment on that?
So I guess a clarifying question within that is, if a company was using AI successfully, and I agree with Victoria here, it's about growth rather than just necessarily replacing. If we can get our people to act like 10 people, I'd rather do that than get 10 people to act like 10 people, but actually from 5 people who've got rid of them, etc. So if it was working for a company, why would hype create it to stall? Or why would that, if it was working for them, what would change?
I don't think we've had long enough for us to really destruct test how much AI is capable of force multiplying people. I mean, certainly within software, there's been so much hype, and then the reality is most senior developers actually switch it off after a bit because they realise that it's making them stupid.
Sure, as in the skills are starting to...
No, just the autocomplete. They're pausing to wait for the
Fine.
autocomplete to happen.
Fine. So I think there's, I mean, Replit announced a tool, I think it was a week ago, which was both collaborative and AI-induced, where you could tag different team members, etc. I think what will end up happening is companies will define what you call a delegation zone. And so given the skills profile of different people in your teams alongside a model, it will intelligently pass from one to the other. And I think certainly where we're looking at it is that composite that's better than the whole. So is there hype? Absolutely. And every time there's a new technology, there's hype. And you kind of ride that cycle of kind of inflated expectations, and you've got the valley of disappointment. And then eventually it finds. I still don't think we're done with the hype. I think it's going to go on for another year, another 2 years before maybe in some sense it bursts. I do think this time is different in that, okay, is it better than the engineers at the moment? No. But given a Turing test, it passing an output of an average employee, I think you wouldn't be able to detect which is which, and if not now, in 6 months, in 12 months, in a year's time, etc. So I'd perhaps disagree on the hype changing things, but I do think there is hype.
Okay, one more question here. Let's just try and keep it brief with the questions to see how long we got.
Okay, I'll try and keep the microphone working as well. Put yourself forward 5 years or 10 years. So LLMs are looking at history. Now we have AIs who are looking forward and not only predicting, but actually acting on those predictions for us. The question is, how do you see the human race mediating with those AIs so that they don't go off and do things that the human race doesn't want them to do?
That's to the postcard.
the AI taking over. That'll chestnut. That is such a good question, and you were talking about Aldous Huxley's dystopian sort of vision of the future earlier, and there's a lot of other great novels in that direction. So I suppose what we're already seeing, I know you asked about 10 years into the future, but what we're already seeing now is that, you know, there's sort of this, almost this split between people who are going all in and, you know, really believing in AI just changing the future, and they're like engulfing themselves in it, and they want to have, you know, the more power, the better, the more things are AI controlled, the better. And then you have this other direction of people moving out of cities, starting, you know, communities and permaculture farms, and that whole, like, you know, what people call the soft life, sort of city exiters, so to speak. And so I think both of those are probably gonna harden and gonna get bigger. Funnily enough, if you speak to Mark Zuckerberg, if you've listened to also people like Tim Ferriss, who are, you know, very big on technology, Steve Jobs, they all actually took technology away from their kids because they understand the harms of it. So my, I suppose, optimistic mind would hope that there's a path where we find a bit of balance and we create some more frameworks and guardrails to protect ourselves from where this could go as a species. There will always be people who want the best for this world, and there will always be people who want the worst because they're purely being selfish or just experimental or whatever, and we can't, you know, completely control for that. But yeah, where is it going to be in 10 years? I suppose the other you know, view you could take is not that much is going to happen overall, because the average still meets in the average, and most people don't even know about AI out there at the moment. You know, how is it going to affect the global population? I don't know. Is London a good representation? Is this room a good representation, right? And are most people not even going to notice the fact that there's AI in their lives? I think, yeah, this is, again, it's more of a philosophical debate, but I'm here for it. Mike, you had a question.
One last question.
Would love to hear Mike's question.
One last question. I think you're all far too optimistic. We're all fucked. Journalist from TechCrunch. Look, one thing I didn't hear on the panel, I'd love to hear, you just do a couple of sentences, is there's obviously a big race between foundational models, OpenAI, you know, and Gemini and all the rest of it, and the open source movement represented by startups like Mistral, but actually there's obviously many more. And what we're going to see, and so there is, you know, on one side of the coin, I think one of you started the point about eventually we would have a startup of 10 people, you know, killing a giant. Sure. Is that going to be with a foundational model, or is it going to be with open source? Because open source itself has a life of its own, and that's basically why Facebook Meta is releasing open source, because it's completely fucking behind and was totally caught with its trousers down, and it's the only way it can basically screw over Google and the rest of them by releasing the flying monkeys to the wind to try and take out Gemini and all the rest of them. So just briefly, do you think the startups of tomorrow will be powered by open source or by foundational models? Go.
Mark Zuckerberg is the hero of our times with open source models. It's an interesting one. I think anytime you open something up to a community, particularly a large community, being all the developers or all the AI talent in the world, is a very powerful thing. And you've got the ability to topple incumbents. You're starting to see specifically this week open source models being tweaked to the point where GPT-4 is regularly being beaten by different open source efforts. I think it comes down to capitalization and you see partnerships, and you see kind of the infinite war chest that Altman has and the global tours he's doing and the alliances he's striking. I think we don't know what's behind the scenes at a place like OpenAI. I think they've already hit, there was a paper last October by DeepMind called Operationalizing the Path to AGI and defining AGI. So AGI being general intelligence that's good at everything to certain degrees and actually putting specificity on it. So hitting like level 3, being better than 50% of people, and eventually getting up to 50%, virtuoso level 5 being better than 99% of people. I think they've got internal models that are already better than what we're seeing. Sora was this amazing thing that came out, video generation by OpenAI. At some point in February, they released it the day after Google released Gemini to kind of shut up the news cycle about them. Now, the thing I found scary is this video generation tool is so good. They've taken it to Hollywood studios, and they've turned down £800 million expansions because they've seen this thing and what it can do. OpenAI had finished that in February 23, and they've got a load of stuff that they're hiding. So I think it's probably being closed source, and I think when they're required to by the competition and the open source community, they will release something better. I still believe in the power of the collective, but it needs to coordinate and get around its aims better.
I'll keep it short and sweet. Right now, for the next 2 to 3 years, it will be the closed source ones that are better, and then eventually, as we get more community input, it'll be open source that people are using, and that's going to be more powerful.
Excellent. Such an interesting subject that we might have to actually do another one of these events again, but we have one request, one last question over here from our co-organizer.
Thank you. So my question is, most of our conversation has been around software, but NVIDIA's released some new AI chips, which are going to change everything. So how do you think that's going to happen with NVIDIA? Not just NVIDIA, but how do you see hardware changing the AI landscape?
I was in the US a couple of weeks ago, and there was a startup called Grok, not to be confused with Elon Musk's Grok, and they'd essentially backwards mapped what they need a processing unit to do to be able to run their large language model and to use open source models as well. And then they backwards engineered what the hardware has to look like. And so they created a new unit called an LPU, a language processing unit. And this thing can compute and generate text. LPU. So but they've created a unit that they call the LPU, the language processing unit, which is a trademark thing. It's a branding thing. It's a whatever. But it can generate. You can generate me a year's worth of lesson plans for 6 different grades, and it can think for about half a second, and generate them all. So I think a close alignment between the software stack or the language model stack that you're building and aligning it with the hardware stack will be an increased trend.
You can also look at the stock price of NVIDIA versus Intel, and NVIDIA outsources all of their chips to Taiwan, so that's like almost a single point of failure if there is, a conflict that plays out. So maybe it's a good time to buy stocks in Intel. I don't know.
So, as a last thing before you guys all get up, and I'm sure liquids in and out and all the rest of it, because you've been sitting for a while patiently. Thank you, by the way. Can we do a selfie together from the stage? Yeah, one for the socials, as we were talking about it. Oh, it's all right. It's empty. Okay.
I'll do one too.
You want to get in there?
Okay, everybody.
Smile.
Wave. Hands in the air.
One more.
Okay, great.
One last one.
Woo.
Yeah.
Nice.
Okay.
Thank you.
Got the microphone. Okay.
Is it karaoke time now?
It's karaoke time now. Well, can we give a big round of applause to our amazing panelists today?